My personal experience with the stigma is being a school pupil, especially during my exam times where I can't go to a teacher, especially male ones, talking about me being on my period and not having any products available to me.
Especially since I've become more empowered and comfortable talking about things like this and advocating. Even when I'm doing that on our social media, we get hate, and sometimes it really disheartens me. But again, the thing that keeps me going is having a community like this and having conferences to speak to people about this reignites that drive to kind of fight for period justice.
I've suffered for years with endometriosis, or suspected endometriosis. I'm on year 6 of hoping to get diagnosed with it. So I've really got a personal interest there to look at period injustices and fight the period stigma.
I feel like periods are such a normal part of life. They're nothing to be ashamed of, and I feel like they should be spoken about much more. Periods and stigma shouldn't be in the same sentence. Since it's such a natural part of life, it's not something that people choose to have or people choose to go through. It's literally just biology, and stigma and something that's biological shouldn't go together.
First of all, I remember when I was 11, 12, 13, and I was mortified going to the toilet, opening a pad. I was like, I'd get my friends to turn the hand dryer on. But now, having been empowered by people and organisations such as Irise, I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, other people are going through this and other people are feeling like they have to hide things. And I remember the impact it had on me. I was really shy and I was really uncomfortable in myself when I was going through that week of menstruating. And I'd never ever want to know that anyone else is feeling like that, and I can't do anything to help that.
So I remember learning from the pandemic the sort of injustices that had come from the pandemic. The food banks closing, schools going, nobody could access the free period products, and it really struck with me that nobody was talking about this, and it had taken 2 years since the pandemic for somebody to even mention this to me, when I've been talking about periods for a long time and nobody brought it up. And then I began to look into the cycle of period poverty and how period shame feeds into period poverty, and how laws around periods and anything around periods really feed into that shame.
What has motivated me to fight period stigma is that English pupils were given the opportunity that Welsh people weren't. So they were able to access the free period products, which I don't think is fair to everyone in Wales.
To really hone in on taking an intersectional approach when we're talking about menstruation, to make sure that no marginalised groups are left out. I mean, the term marginalised means they're already left out from these conversations. We want to see things like menstruators instead of women who menstruate, because we're mindful that trans men would then be left out, women who menstruate would be shunned out of this conversation, and this is a conversation that everyone needs to be involved in because it's something that affects everyone.
The change I'd like to see is how the Scottish government would have their plan fall through throughout the UK, so being able to access the free period products.
The change I would like to see is all period products being accessible to people who bleed. Accessible and affordable. If they can't be free, they should at least be affordable. I would also like periods to be a normal part of conversation. Just the same way someone asks you what you ate this morning, someone can ask you if you're on your period, and there should be no shame about answering that question.
Action, I'm quite focused on the medicalisation of periods, looking at contraception, who's targeted for contraception, who's targeted with the pill, to be put on the pill as a way of trying to control the periods, but then does this also mean that they don't have to get products? Or are we targeting young girls, telling them to go on the coil, which then in turn can make the periods much heavier? And it's never considered that using the coil as contraception, you're then making somebody have to use heavy period products, which are obviously much more costly. that are sometimes much harder to come by. They're usually the first ones that are out of stock in the shops. They're not usually accessible in things like period banks. They're quite hard to come by. It's kind of forgotten in the sort of medical world of looking at contraception and looking at periods. So that's something that I'm definitely wanting to focus more on.
Act now. We've been talking about this for so long and it's getting tiring. We just want something to happen soon. So listen to us, please.
Everybody is affected by periods. Doesn't matter who you are, where you've come from, everybody is affected in some way. And some people are affected much more than this, but it isn't their responsibility to target them. This should be done for everybody. It doesn't matter where you've come from. Everybody has the right to have access to period products without feeling the shame and the stigma of having to access them. I think you need to look at it from an education level. Start in schools, go into the schools, tell people what periods are. Don't use euphemisms. Don't shun it off and say we'll get onto that. We've got other pressing issues. This is a pressing issue that needs targeting right now.
They need to stop ignoring the pupils who need the products and need to start listening to everyone.
It's very unnecessary. There shouldn't be period poverty. We shouldn't have to fight this battle for something that is 100% natural. They should fix up.